Welcome everyone to another Spot On chat. I'm Rebecca Monet with Zorakle Profiles. We provide profiling tools to franchisors and franchise brokers that help facilitate a right fit between a prospective franchisee and a franchisor. Today, I'm talking again with Tracy Kawa, the president of Kawa Community Partners and a Spot On master trainer with Zorakle Profiles. So thanks again for joining me, Tracy. It's so good to have you back.
It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
So in our last chat, we were talking about how different people from a personality or wiring perspective are dealing with this coronavirus crisis differently. Especially in terms of being flexible and dealing with their emotions. But so I thought maybe we could talk more specifically about some of those personalities and how each of those personalities might be dealing with the challenges that are afoot right now. The one that I find particularly interesting today is what we call the connector. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Zorakle profile, the connector is the logic is based on William Marston's work. So if you're familiar with the DISC or the predictive index or the Myers-Briggs, you would see this connector as someone who is steadfast, loyal, someone that's all about relationships. It's this person you can tell your deepest, darkest secrets to, and you know they're going to keep it in confidence, and they're all about teamwork and doing it together. So that's kind of
warm, supportive person, that eager listener who's looking to connect you to whoever it is that's going to help you solve the question or the problem at hand.
That's a great way to describe it. So with challenges like what we're experiencing today in business, and how are the connectors responding, and what can they do to help them get through this challenging time?
You know, if you think of the connector like the facilitator, think of them like the facilitator. So if they were already working remotely, then they're probably making connections among people, building community, showing people how to access ways to do business online. If you think of a connector as somebody who was going into a physical location, a physical workplace, so there's been this pattern interrupt all of a sudden, right? Business as usual has been disrupted, and all of a sudden, you know, maybe it's given like a halt, like, oh my goodness, I'm disconnected, I'm not connected with people, what do I do? But that's the time that the connectors usually dig deep and find their strength and start innovating in new and creative ways in order to reach out to others. So whether it's via phone or whether it's via a Zoom or a Skype or whatever online platform they use, you know, this is a time for them to get a little more creative and create community, but only online.
Right.
Slightly different, but the same type of impact.
Right. So they are indeed just that. They're the connectors. They want to be included, and relationship is so important to them. And this is going to be a difficult time. If you have employees that are connectors, if you have franchisees that are connectors, this is going to be very difficult on the connector at this point. So obviously everything I would recommend is do whatever is possible. These Zoom meetings, reach out to make sure the connector's okay. If the connector hasn't already reached out to you first, which oftentimes is what's happening. The connector also is not quick to change or to adapt. They like routine. And so this, I like the word that you used earlier, which is disruption, right? This is a disruption in their life. They're quite organized and quite capable of executing, and all of a sudden everything's in the air. and it's an uncomfortable place for them. So
Yeah, suddenly everything is up in the air, but the connector will usually find their systems that work for them.
yeah.
And then teach others the systems or pull others into the systems. But I like what you said about, if you do know of connectors, if you're used to working with connectors, reach out to them, make sure that they're doing okay, make sure that they're not in any kind of paralysis over their norm being disrupted.
Yeah. Yeah. And connectors, because they are so relational, when they don't have that human interaction, um, it kind of zaps their energy. So it's very important during these times that the connectors reach out, and those of us that love connectors and work with connectors, that we're doing the same thing, that we're staying in touch, and preferably face to face. So let's talk
Yes.
about another group. Tracy, let's talk about the director. Now, the director is what we would call the high D or high dominance. So they're all about take charge, bottom line, goal oriented, big picture types of individuals. So they're good at delegating. They're good at getting others to um, get things done. So they're have some a little bit of a assertiveness, aggressiveness, fast thinking, fast paced kind of individuals. So emotionally, not so much. They're very head oriented individuals. How do you think they're dealing with this pandemic right now? Whether you're a franchisor that's a director, or a franchisee that's a director, um, or a franchise broker that are director, how do you think they're handling things right now?
Well, a director is that person that's really going to be like that 100,000-foot view visionary. Quite often, they're the ones who have the big picture. So for the most part, the directors are trying to figure out, they're already 10 steps ahead.
Yes.
They're trying to figure out how this is all going to shake out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're probably creating roadmaps in their minds, or not the roadmap, but the end vision. And they're probably focusing on some of those steps and plans that they can put in place. They might be creating the idea for a new business. They may be creating the idea for team building, but they're certainly creating. They're certainly
Mm-hmm.
challenged, like you were talking about in one of our previous podcasts. They're being challenged. They're looking for new and creative ways to work and adapt. And they're probably reaching out to others. I know of a few directors that are focused on different problems. They're focused on, how to keep their teams safe from the pandemic and different ideas associated with that. A couple of others are working on new ideas that they're having for innovation, or new ways that they can adapt their business, so to speak. So
Mm-hmm.
I think focusing on the big picture, but what that variation of the big picture is as it pertains to their business, only they know. And they'll be probably speaking to a thinker near them to help put the steps together to figure it out.
I think you're right. So it's funny. I was talking to a franchisor that's a director yesterday, and he was like crazy intense, and he was telling me about a conversation he had with a franchisee, and he went into this almost dictatorial, autocratic, bossy pants, let's call it,
Yeah.
bossy pants. So directors shift quickly, right? And if they're taking
Yeah.
a big organization, it's like a ship, right? They're trying to move a big ship in a particular direction.
Sure.
The director, as you pointed out, is already there. They're 10 steps ahead, and now they're trying to get everybody else going that same direction. And the rest of us are sitting there with a whiplash, right? Because they've already gone that direction. Exactly.
Where did they go? Like 0 to 60.
It's so true.
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
it's so true. And so the director needs to remember that the rest of the world doesn't think as fast as they do. They
As
don't think.
fast. And they don't understand why, but the rest of the world does not think quite as fast. Yeah.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And so it's a fascinating thing to work with directors. They can
Yeah.
get critical and they can become bossy pants. So if your boss is becoming more bossy pants than usual, he's probably a director. But as you pointed out, Tracy, because they are so strategic, and they're quick about paying attention to return on investment, keeping that money coming in during this particular
Oh, yeah.
time, they are a valuable resource through this, through this crisis,
Yes.
even though
Oh,
we
yeah.
might get a little whiplash kind of
Yeah,
watching.
and they're definitely on those SBA loans and those payroll loans. They're definitely
Mm-hmm.
on their stride, like you said, and locating where the money and locating, figuring out how to get themselves and their team and their business, keeping it afloat and keeping it moving and staying on point. 100%.
Fabulous. All right, so that takes us to something you alluded to a little bit earlier, which is the thinker, right?
Thank you.
The thinker is that dot the I's, cross the T's individual. So he is systematic, he's organized, he's going to make sure everything is done well, and he's good at orchestrating things. He's good at paying attention to the numbers and making sure everything's efficient and effective. And as you pointed out, the director desperately needs that thinker
It's a two-way street. It's
mm-hmm.
a two-way street, and this is with the caveat being that once the thinker gets over their analysis by paralysis by analysis. So at first the thinker is just, stopped dead in their tracks, trying to figure out this whole new workflow. But once they figure out that workflow, or once they connect with the director who gives them, okay, here's the strategy, here's the vision, this is how we're going to play it. We're going to ride this out. This is how we're going to communicate with the team. This is going to be the new process, or the end result of what we want. We need you to create the new process for it. The thinker is 100% back in the saddle and in their zone of purpose, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. It's amazing the gifting that the thinker has. They are slower, right? And they're going to make sure everything is legal and the documentation is in place and the systems are there, and that there's some efficiencies with whatever the director is suggesting needs to be done. And they are also ones that oftentimes will question, right? Why do we need to do that? Is that the most efficient? And here's some consequences of this idea, Mr. Director, that you have that might be an outflow of that. Here's how we can eradicate that or mitigate that, or in some way work around that issue that, which sometimes happens when we are making fast decisions and we're turning a ship. So we might be heading the right direction, but there's now a wake, right? There's some water that is going in different directions. So the thinker is going to think about those things. He's saying, okay, I'm good with shifting the ship, but what about the wake that's coming after that? How are our franchisees going to deal with these following things? And he's going to make sure the ducks are in the row, so we can execute as much as possible in a flawless way.
Agreed. And I'd like to point something out also that you used to talk about in the trainings, where the thinker, when the thinker used to be in an on-site business meeting, you would really have to ask the thinker what your input is before they left the room, because usually they're still processing everything that took place as they walk out the door. Now that we're working in these new and innovative ways, working on Zoom, working on Skype, it's really important that once, as you're coming to a close with your meeting with your team, that if you have a thinker on board, make it a special point to say, hey, so-and-so, did you have anything to add, or what did you need to contribute to the team meeting?
Exactly. Uh-oh, any way you can you pull the cord on that one?
pleasures of working from
home. I know, it's amazing. We are learning how to be adaptable and go with the flow, right?
Exactly. Which
with the real life,
yeah.
Thank you for pointing out those things about the thinker, because they do need time, and their goal is to help a franchise or a prospective franchisee go through a process that is well thought out, and there's no redundancies, and there's no kind of backwash or issues that come with it. So that brings up our last group, a very fun group, right? What we call the promoter, in the woohoo, and that's you, right, Tracy? You're a promoter.
I'm a promoter connector. So yeah, my wheelhouse, it's all about the people. It's all about the people. It's all about the relationships. Promoter connector, for sure.
It's all about the people. The promoter in particular, like what we call the high I in the DISC model, is an influencer. They're persuasive, they're gregarious, they're wonderful schmoozers. They're oftentimes the life of the party. They love people and being in the midst of people. They can talk an Eskimo into buying an igloo or ice, so they just have this natural propensity to want to influence the thoughts, the buying, and the opinions of others. But they are highly people oriented, and no doubt this time, especially when we're isolated, the promoter is probably like a cat on a hot tin roof. It's probably that extrovert that is feeling some serious withdrawal symptoms if they can't see their coworkers or be going to 1,000 conferences like we do in the franchise space.
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. And I do know a few promoters that are now, again, going back to that word, adapting, pivoting, to make sure that they're staying front and center, so that people know that they're still there. They are still working, whether it's working with their products and services or, adding a little bit to see what could be useful and helpful to others. It's funny about the promoter, because the promoter loves the spotlight, but they really love the spotlight so that they could promote others, which I think is so, it's almost counterintuitive, and it's so interesting. It's like a dichotomy. It's like, focus on me, but focus on you, like help me help you. That kind of thing. And that's what the promoters are looking at right now, how they can help your franchise, how they can help you as a broker, how they can help you grow, how they can help you stay connected to your people, right? A lot of the promoters, outgoing, very, latching on to some processes that they're noticing that are working for other companies, and then bringing them into the confines of the, of the remote working space for the individuals. Right. Constantly bringing something new and exciting, definitely like cutting edge. I mean, this is exciting for a lot of people to all of a sudden be doing these podcasts where a month ago they were working in office, and some people didn't even know what a podcast was, except for something they were listening to on their drive to and from work.
It's so true. I wanted to point out sort of what might be considered a negative of the promoter individual. And I actually saw this in a group scenario where we had 20 people on a Zoom call, and a couple of promoters within that. During stressful times, a promoter who's lacking that human interaction or the ability to promote for this reason or that, they can become a little bit bodacious, and they can become almost superficial. And that's not really who they are, right? They, like you said, they do care about others. They want to promote you just the way they want to promote themselves. But under stressful situation, they go straight into wanting to be the sideshow, wanting to be the center of attention, and they go into a superficial place, or at least it looks that way. So I would warn you, if you are a promoter, this is a time to up the empathy, it's about the other person, and draw less attention to yourself, because your natural tendency as a promoter is to become superficial or sarcastic, or in some way not really paying attention. And this is simply let's call it a way to guard the heart, right? And so I'm going to encourage you to up the empathy, and it's really about the others. Don't draw the attention to yourself. Draw the attention to where you really want it to be, which is towards others. So that's just kind of a little bit of a negative that I wanted to point out about the promoter.
Good point. That was a very good point. I think that there's this tendency for a promoter to want to make light of a situation to ease the tension. But it's not always, what you feel, sometimes we have a tendency to project on others. So I love your point about it upping the empathy, because it's not necessarily about what we as individuals are feeling right now, in so much as how we can have an impact and help others in how they're feeling. So it's upping the empathy, it's upping the compassion. I mean, we're talking with people on a daily basis on these conferences, but yet we don't know if their families are being touched by the coronavirus. We don't know what they're going through personally. So I love the idea about keeping the eye on the prize, keeping the ball in play, keeping focused on the information at hand, and upping that empathy and that compassion, and really creating that tight-knit community, keeping it moving forward, separate but together.
Yeah, great way to put that. So the idea that a promoter tries to add levity or make things lighter in stressful situation is a gift that they have. But sometimes when we are really good at something, it can come across as not caring. So do what you do well, which is build community, still have some fun, but make sure there's some empathy in there. So
absolutely.
What a great conversation.
Yeah, it was lovely. It's very nice, very informative.
Yeah. So thanks again, Tracy, for your time. I look forward to our next SpotOn chat. Have a great rest of the day.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me.